if someone tells you we think you're burned out, they're not doing it to degrade you. They're doing it because they're concerned about you. So if someone says we think you're burned out, ask some probing questions and say, okay, why do you think that? What are some signs that you're seeing? Just get a little more into it because sometimes you get somebody outside of our fishbowl and they say some things and you go, ooh, hey, all right, well, now you can start making some adjustments to change the temperature a bit.
Hello, listener, and welcome back to Leading with Integrity. Today marks the final entry in our 4-episode arc on burnout, stress, and anxiety in the workplace. And I couldn't have picked a better guest to round off that mini-series than the self-described Chief Burnout Officer, Michael Levitt. Michael is the founder of the Breakfast Leadership Network. He's a recognized global thought leader on burnout and workplace culture. He produces impactful content addressing these critical issues. He leads a multi-skilled firm dedicated to tackling burnout and improving workplace culture, and his expertise in these areas stems from his extensive background in HR leadership and executive coaching. Michael is also the host of the Breakfast Leadership Show podcast. As a certified NLP and CBT therapist, Michael brings a unique perspective to the issues we'll be discussing today, as does his personal experience with burnout, which we'll be hearing a bit more about very soon. So I hope you get loads out of this one, and be sure to listen to the end of the episode for details on how to learn more, as well as information on how to join the Integrity Leaders online community.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Michael, welcome to Leading with Integrity. Great to have you on the show today. Really looking forward to hearing about your expertise in burnout and all these other things as well to do with leadership and stress and so on and so forth. So yeah, welcome to the show.
Great to be with you today. Really looking forward to this conversation.
Over to you to introduce yourself, tell the listeners a bit about your background, your career so far, what you do today, and why you do it.
Yeah, I formed my organization, the Breakfast Leadership Network, back in 2016. It was birthed out of my own personal journey with burnout, which took place in 2009 and 2010, where over a period of 1 year, or 369 days to be exact, I had a heart attack that should have killed me. And then 17 weeks later, I lost my job during the Great Recession in North America. A few months later, my car was repossessed. And then finally, in May of 2010, my home was foreclosed. So all of those tragic things happened to me in a year. And all those things happened to me because I was burned out. I wasn't taking care of myself. I was making mistakes at work. I wasn't making good choices in any aspect of my life. And it all came to a crashing halt. And it was probably the best thing that could have ever happened to me because it gave me another opportunity. And I literally had a couple choices. One, I could have said, you know what? I survived all of that. I'm Superman. I'm just going to continue on my merry way, the way that I've been doing things. But I realized right away that that was not sustainable for me. And I decided I'm going to dig in a little bit deeper and figure out how I burned out, why I burned out, what burnout was, and redesign things for me. And before I continue, I always like to frame this with people because a lot of people that are burned out or they're thinking they're burned out or they're approaching burnout get a little leery when they hear that I reinvented my life. 99% of people that are burning out or are burned out do not need to reinvent your life. You don't. You have to make a couple adjustments here and there, and that depends on the individual and figuring out how you ended up burned out and make those adjustments. I like saying adjustments instead of changes because people hear the word change and they go, oh, I can't do that. But the only thing constant in life is change. But adjustment sounds a little softer, and I think people are able to do that. So after recovering from burnout, I was working ironically in the healthcare industry and went back to the healthcare industry after my wonderful year. and approached it differently and did things differently, had boundaries around when I worked and when I didn't, and was really successful at what I was doing. And I was noticing my peers, and this was in 2014, 2015. So just to give you a time frame there, I noticed a lot of my peers in the healthcare industry were rapidly approaching burned out or being burned out. And it scared the heck out of me. And I thought, all right, I have to do something about this. I can't allow this to happen. These are my colleagues. I can't watch and stand by and let them do this to themselves based on what happened to me. So I started talking with people. It wasn't really, fully disclosing what had happened to me, but I was saying, I've got experience with this and you want to avoid these things. And here's some things you can do to help make things easier for you. And some of them took it to heart and made some adjustments. Others said, no, I'm just going to work through it, which we think if we work more, that's going to help us get through it. And that's actually the opposite of what you need to do. So after that, I decided, okay, I need to do something more about this. What can I do? So I started writing about it. I launched a blog, started speaking at local conferences and events about burnout, what it was, and the signs and all of that. And it kind of took a life of its own. And a colleague of mine had said, you know what, you probably have a consulting business here because you could help people, pick, your area of expertise, who you like to work with, and start working with them. So I did. I was working with C-suite executives and starting to guide them down the road of not living a life that was completely burned out because it was impacting their decisions, their family life, their productivity, everything. It was impacting their organization. And even though it wasn't necessarily noticeable, it was approaching a big problem. And especially when you're dealing with organizations that are, dealing with a lot of important stakeholders or publicly traded or whatever the case may be, if there's a failure at the CEO level, that has some real big consequences, especially if it's a publicly traded organization. That's people losing their investment money because something went wrong with the company. And you hate to see that. So I started doing that work. And then I noticed a lot of the people in the organization, not only the C-suite, but the lower ranks, were going through the same thing because it flows like a river. If the CEO's burned out, there's a good chance that the team's approaching that too. So I kind of shifted my approach a little bit. And then one thing led to another, and I thought, all right, maybe I should kind of chronicle what this is, and decided to, basically release to the public what had happened to me. So I released a book in 2017 describing those 369 days. And a colleague of mine, we talked about this in the pre-show a little bit, said I should launch a podcast. And I was dead set against that. I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't have time to do that. And he said, no, just do a short 5-minute episodes on burnout prevention and science of it and all that. So I did. And after I did that for a few months, he calls me and he says, so when are you interviewing people? I'm like, what the heck are you talking about? I'm not interviewing anybody. Stop that. I don't know. It's good, bad enough you're making me do this. Why should I do that? He said, just do it. And now, that was in 2017. Here we are, 2024. Well over 700 episodes in my show and interviewing, and I'm having a blast with it. And I'm thankful that I got that kick in the butt. Thanks, Steve, for doing that, because it really, really made a big difference. And so the organization ended up forming first as a consulting type of entity, and then writing, and then keynote speaking, and the podcast, and media, and the videos, and YouTube channel, and all that kind of stuff. And it's over the recent years, it started morphed into more of a media type entity because of the content that I'm creating, whether it's a podcast show or articles on our website or books or speeches or talks and things like that. So it's kind of shifted direction a little bit. I still do consulting, but what I find is that I can reach a lot more people by putting content out there, and then they can get exposed to what burnout is, how to do it, how to run a business, how to retain people, all the challenges that we're seeing throughout the world when it comes to this thing we call work. I do a lot of things on that because for me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but for me, it's really important for companies to be healthy, because if companies are healthy, they're making better products and services, which you and I consume. We want good stuff. We don't want to be buying garbage or have lousy service. We've all unfortunately experienced that. We want the good stuff and we're willing to pay for it. But in order to have that happen, those employees in that organization has to be healthy as well. So it's a multi-pronged approach that I take with the ultimate goal of making people and organizations better, because that just benefits all of us.
Yeah, I do agree. I think, healthy companies to me means healthy people within those companies, doesn't it? And I guess the core of leadership really has to always be about the people, in my opinion. Sometimes that's an unpopular opinion, believe it or not, but
it has to be. It has to be. And
yeah.
I had a conversation the other day, and one of the challenges that organizations have been having with retention is a lot of companies are still using the playbook of this employee is going to be here for 10 years. Majority of people are not staying at companies for 10 years, 2 or 3 years max, and then they're going on and doing something else. So organizations that are thriving and growing recognize this. And what they've done is they've changed the playbook to say, okay, this is an employee that's going to be here 2 or 3 years. Let's maximize their productivity. Let's maximize their experience of this place to make sure that it's a healthy experience for them. Get them to be as creative as they can be so they find it fulfilling and learn and grow. And then every couple years you're getting some new ideas coming in with new people that are coming in instead of, oh, we got to replace this person, so we're hiring somebody else. It's a mind shift change, quite frankly, for organizations to say we're bringing in additional talent to make our team better. And yes, some people come, some people go, but we're constantly making it better. And the analogy that we discussed was a lot like college sports in the US. So I'll pick on basketball and football. So these athletes are with their teams at a maximum of 4 years. Usually it's a couple years. So you figure every 4 years, in a successful school program that's always winning championships or always competing for championships year after year after year after year. If you think about it, every 2 or 3 years, they have had a complete cycle of people. The team is completely different. Different people might have the same coaching staff, but you got completely different players, but yet they continue to win. They continue to be, successful. Why? Because they follow a system. There's a methodology there, and businesses can do that too. They can make it where it's a really successful company where people thrive, and you grasp that talent, and you create environments where they can thrive. And that, going back to what you said, that's caring for your people, because if you care for your people are going to care for your customers. So if they care for their customers, guess what? Your business is going to do quite well. So create that environment, and you're going to alleviate a lot of the problems that we're seeing all these companies having with retention and finding people and all of that. You won't have that issue if you take care of people.
The whole kind of the 10-year, the shorter term down to the 2 years at most, probably, I think. It depends on the industry, doesn't it? But I agree. Yeah, definitely. The companies that are getting better at retention are the ones that are refocusing and having that shift of mindset. But I also feel like just because you're expecting people to stay for 10 or 15 years, why does that mean you don't do all those things that you've talked about anyway? Like, why does that change of average term and retention period mean that they've got to? Yeah, I know why. Obviously, there's the economic realities of it, and they're taking people for granted, because if you know someone's going to stay with you 10 years, you're not going to bother, you're going to try as hard, are you, to keep them happy? But imagine if you did, and then they did stay 10 years, you'd get all of those benefits, but for a longer period of time. Anyway, I'm an idealist, I know.
Yeah. I'm with you on that. Nothing would make me happier than for people to find that special place where they can stay there for a long time and impact and grow and continue to contribute and learn. And you want, as an employer, the ultimate goal, or one of the goals anyway, is you want it to be very, very challenging for your people to leave, and not because you're holding them hostage or external economics challenges or whatever. You want people to really think long and hard. Yeah, this other opportunity is really, really good for me, but I would be leaving here do I really want to leave here? You want people to ask that question. If you have an environment like that, it's awesome. When I was leading healthcare organizations, and the last one that I led, there was a handful of extremely talented people that you know basically learned a lot within our organization, and then took that experience and took a promotion with another organization. And every one of them told me this was a really hard decision, because I thrive in this environment. The environment gives us the flexibility to be creative in healthcare, which can be kind of rigid, but new ideas, new programs, new things that we allowed them to come up with to make sure that the patients were getting more than just going to the doctor to get checked on their A1C levels or whatever. It was really important to create that environment. So when they did leave, I was thrilled for them, not happy that they were leaving, but the old adage, and I don't know who said it originally, but we've heard it several times, where they say, what happens if we overtrain these people and they get really good and they leave? And the response is, what if we don't train them to be any good and they stay? Well, you want people to be so good that they could leave. If they choose not to, guess what? You have a really great employee that does some amazing things for your clients, patients, customers, whoever you want to identify them as. And it gets contagious. Then other people see that and they see how they're doing, and then the other people start acting that way, and they start growing and they feel comfortable. And then all of a sudden you have a really healthy environment that is just thriving. And organizations can be that way. I've seen them. They still exist. I wish there were more, and that's why we do what we do, to bring awareness to organizations and individuals and say, it doesn't have to be negative. It doesn't have to be torture to go to work. It can be a lot of fun, because you get to create and work in the vocation that you're passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of my favorite cliches, and I don't know who came up with it either. But yeah, it's the perfect description of why training is important, and why mentoring and personal development and all these things that a leader should be doing. Like that part, it's probably top 3 of your highest priorities, I would say, as a leader, is to be developing your people. Again, I get where you're coming from with the, we're not happy to see them go, but glad they've got something better to go to. And and it can be sad sometimes, but also it's quite happy because they're taking a step to a better place. No, that makes it sound a bit wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, it's better for them, and it really depends, because sometimes, and I knew, and I'm thinking of one individual in particular, they had a lot of aspirations. They were doing things outside of work to professionally grow, even going to Toastmasters, for example, to learn how to be a better public speaker. They weren't interested in going and doing keynote talks or anything like that. They just wanted to be better at giving presentations, because they knew that was going to be a requirement for the ultimate role that they wanted to have in healthcare. So I encouraged that. I'm like, please do that. That's awesome, because they needed some time off, or they need to shift their schedule a little bit in order for them to attend. And like, consider it done. That you want to grow personally. This is benefiting you as an individual. I mean, we're going to benefit from it too. And the organization they went to definitely benefit from it. But if I didn't give them that opportunity, they had to work, that night instead of doing that, then all of a sudden you have an employee that isn't as outgoing. They feel like this company doesn't believe in my professional development. And then they end up leaving and taking a position that may be parallel and not a promotion, just to get out of there. And I've seen that happen too often. And it doesn't need to be that way. You invest in your people and give them that ability for them to develop themselves. Do it. You're going to benefit from it. Your customers are going to benefit from it. It's one of the lowest cost investments you can do.
That's a good way of looking at it. It's almost like having a community mindset, isn't it, in your industry? And I mean, again, it depends on the industry and how big or small it is. But I mean, if you're forcing people into the position where they're taking that parallel move, it's likely going to be one of your competitors, isn't it? So there's that challenge to face. But also, if the whole industry is behaving like that, nobody in the industry is progressing as quickly or as high up as they could be if everyone just took a different approach to it all. I spent quite a lot of time working in quite a small niche industry where a problem on top of that was people wouldn't come back, and the reputation of the business then suffers as well. Whereas if you take the approach you're talking about, they'll remember that support, they'll remember the positive experience, they'll sing your praises to other people in the industry that you probably still need to work with. And maybe one day when the right opportunity comes up, they'll come back and bring all the training and skills they've learned at other places to your organization. So it's short-term versus long-term thinking as well, isn't it?
Definitely. And it reminds me of a couple instances where I ran into a couple people over the last few years that used to work for me when I was in the healthcare industry, two different clinics, two different people. And they both said the same thing. Said, the impact you had on me, really gave me the confidence to do this job and stay in this industry. And you were just an amazing boss. And it made me feel good. I had to make sure I kept my ego in check, because sometimes, that your head can get really inflated. I'm the greatest boss ever. The coffee mug says so. But that's not it. It was, for me, I, immediately after that conversation with both of them was, I reflected on, and I was so thankful for the great bosses that I've had in my life. And I've had more great bosses than bad ones or challenging ones. Not necessarily say they were bad, but there were a few that could have done things differently, but that's their choice. But at the end of the day, I borrowed from their leadership style. Of course, I'm a leadership junkie and consultant, so you study leadership tips. And even this morning, I was revisiting. It was in an email that I got about the late coach John Wooden from UCLA, who won 10 national championships in 12 years. I mean, that's unheard of for somebody to win that many championships, other than like Manchester United back in the day, always winning things. But there's situations where you lean on those things, and they're so simple. But quoting the late Jim Rohn, there's a lot of things in leadership and management that are easy to do, but unfortunately, they're also easy not to do. And I think so many people get stuck in that not to do arena, and that again impacts organizations and impacts your people. You don't realize as a leader, whether you are the CEO or you're the front lines, you're still leading people. You don't understand what impact you have on people. So once you recognize you have impact on people, then do the right thing and take care of them and help them as much as you can. And you never know, you might run into them in a store and they thank you for being such a great boss. Or I used to work at a grocery store when I was a teenager, and my elementary school teacher was in sixth grade, Mrs. Nicholas. She would come into the grocery store from time to time, and I, saw her, and I gave her a big hug. Wouldn't have gave her a big hug when I was in her class, because she was a little hard as far as a teacher. But as I grew older, I appreciated the lessons that was taught by her. And I'm going to make an assumption based on her age that she's probably no longer here. But if I saw her again, I would do the same thing, because there was something foundational about what they did. She invested in me and the other students as well. But I think when you invest in people, it leaves footprints and fingerprints. And if you do it the right way and in a positive way, you're shaping someone's life for the better. And that is a superpower. So don't take it lightly. Do well and act well, and be very careful with people to help them and not hurt them.
100%. It's another famous quote, who I can't remember said it, but it's the one about people don't necessarily remember the things you say or the things you did, but they do remember the way you made them feel.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're talking about here really is making people feel valued by you as the leader, your organization as a whole. And that's what they'll remember, or vice versa. They'll remember you not feeling very valued.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And I had a conversation yesterday with somebody, and they're not having the best experience where they're working. They brought in some new people, and the writing's on the wall that this new regime, using their word, not mine, is coming in to basically downsize or clear out a lot of people to cut costs and whatnot, because that's what this individual has done in their previous career. So that's their role. They're good at it from everything that I've been told and heard. But that's the situation. But what that has done is created an environment basically that people are second guessing themselves. They're looking over their shoulder. They're wondering if today's the day that they're going to get got, is a mob term, I guess. And what happens when you are fearful of losing your job, your performance is going to drop and you're not going to perform well. You're going to start making mistakes. And guess what? You make mistakes, you end up manifesting what you're fearing. Like, okay, keep making mistakes, they're going to fire me. Well, yeah, if you're worried about making mistakes, guess what? Sometimes worries can come true, and hopefully they wouldn't. But if you're not paying attention and being your best self, you're going to start making mistakes. So it's so easy to have an environment that can be really healthy and supportive. And it's just as easy to bring in somebody that can completely change the temperature and make it an absolute cesspool of an organization to work for. And I've had the pleasure or misfortune of being involved or witnessing both. And needless to say, the healthier organization is my preference, but reality is that a lot of times it's not that way, and it's unfortunate because it doesn't have to be that way, but it is. And there's only so much you can do about it. Control what you can control and update the CV as much as you can. Even if you love your job, you should always update your CV anyway. Just keep it up to date because it's a good way to refresh and remind yourself, what do I actually do for this company? Because sometimes, again, we get so lost in the weeds of what we do in our vocation that we don't put it down on paper. It's like, write it down. Even if it's just wow, I can't believe I get to do this, and I know how to do this, because we didn't know how to do this stuff before. Now we do, and you got to take time and celebrate that, and invest in yourself as well. Whether it's professional development or just recognition of everything that you've accomplished so far.
I find it a really great way of reflecting on your achievements as well, and it helps with imposter syndrome and confidence as well. And it's such a small thing, isn't it? Sometimes just listening. Oh, yeah, I forgot I did that. Yeah, I was actually really proud of that. Yeah, I'll put that on the CV, and it helps with the mindset as well. So I mean that whole scenario. I mean the self-fulfilling job loss, I guess, self-fulfilling redundancy. It's stress, isn't it? Really, that's what we're talking about, and which kind of leads us into the topic of the episode, really, which was burnout and the leadership implications of that. So you talked about it a little bit already, but it'd be really good, I think, if we start with what actually is burnout, because I've used the S word, and a lot of people conflate the two, but I think there is a difference. So what is burnout, and why does it happen to people as well?
I'll give you, and I'll paraphrase the definition from the World Health Organization, which ICD-11, which is basically a disease. ICD is a disease registry that the World Health Organization manages. So it lists all the diseases on the planet. ICD-11 included burnout. Although they said burnout is not a disease, they classified it as a workplace phenomenon. And what it is basically it's when you have prolonged unaddressed stress due to the constant demands of life. You're overwhelmed, you're fatigued, you're not making good choices in life. You're just not able to keep up with the demands of life. So the stress word, you're not burned out unless you have prolonged unaddressed stress. Now, you can have a prolonged period of stress, but if you address it or mitigate it as much as you can, then it prevents burnout. Another question I get a lot, and having experienced both of these, I can tell you my feelings about the situation, because when you describe depression and you describe burnout, all of a sudden you start looking at the ingredients of both and they go, wow, there's a lot of similarities here. What is burnout depression? No, but again, there's a lot of similar symptoms on it. Where I find the biggest difference, and again, I've been clinically depressed and I have been clinically burned out. So I've checked all the boxes on that. The biggest difference is when you are burned out, you still somehow, some way can muster up the energy or bandwidth or muster up whatever you need to get what you need to get done. When you're clinically depressed, oftentimes you can't. You just are in a ball. You're crying. You can't function. Where burnout, you're still functioning. A lot of it's autopilot, but there's a lot of similarities and on that. And I think as additional studies continue on both clinical depression and burnout, I'm sure they're going to find some additional remedies. Are they going to start prescribing medications for burnout? I don't know. Even though I worked in healthcare, I don't identify as a clinician, but there's other ways to address burnout. And what I see into, and I'll segue into what are the signs, and we've kind of talked about them a little bit. But the common signs that I see with burnout is 1, you're not sleeping well. Number 2, you're making mistakes at work. You're forgetful. Your head's kind of in a fog. You just don't know what's going on. You're more irritated than normal. You could be a grumpy person by trade, but when you're burned out, it's amplified. And a big sign that we see a lot is you lose interest in doing things that you like doing. You're just like, I'm just too tired. I'm too fatigued. I'm working too hard. I don't have time for that. So you start cutting out the fun things in life. And that is mistake number 1. Don't do that. Don't ever cut out things. Even if you're working crazy hours, still schedule something that you enjoy doing. Because if you don't, you're just working. And that takes a toll on you, both physically and mentally. So it's really important to address those things. And definitely want to hear your thoughts on this. But I want to share real quickly how to address burnout quickly. Because a lot of people think once you're burned out, I'm going to be burned out for the next 5 years. No, you can actually recover from burnout pretty quickly. I did. The deeper work is figuring out why you burned out and how to prevent it from happening again. And that's the spot where a lot of people don't take the time to do. But to recover from burnout, the things that I see work and have worked for me and have worked in others that I've worked with in the past is 1, if there's one magic pill, and there really is, but if there's one magic pill that'll really help you, is you have to focus on getting good quality sleep, period. You have to get the best sleep you possibly can, because when we sleep and get deep, restful sleep, our body repairs the damage that we do to ourselves on a daily basis. You might eat the healthiest foods, get plenty of exercise, you live the best life, but we still damage our bodies from stress, information, the atmosphere, air we breathe, food intake, name it. If you get good sleep, you are going to have a fighting chance to be able to navigate around or through stressful situations better, because you have more clarity, you're rested, you're fully energized. So when stressful things happen, and spoiler alert, stressful things happen, you'll be able to navigate through. When you're burned out and you're not getting good sleep, then you don't have the energy or the stamina to deal with those stressful situations. So that's why when a quote unquote tiny stressful situation hits you, it feels like it's a mountain that just fell on top of you because you're just completely overwhelmed. So getting good sleep. Number 2, obviously, get in some activity, even if you are completely immobile, you're fully paralyzed, you can exercise your brain, your mind, work on things that bring you joy and fulfillment in life. So, but if you have an ability to be physically active, do so. Whether it's just even walking, cardio is really important, and weights and things like that as you get older, because your muscles tend to degrade, as I've discovered. Not fun, but ultimately do that. But before you take on any type of exercise routine, please consult with a medical provider or professional. I don't want you to get injured doing an exercise wrong. It's really crucial to do that. Thirdly, surprise, surprise, I'm going to talk about food intake for a minute. North American folks tend to love their fast food. You can see it, from all you got to do is look at the financial reports of these organizations. They're doing quite well. But what happens is food is fuel. So if you want to perform well, you need to put in the right fuel for you to perform well. And this isn't a recommendation or a suggestion, but it's just something that I did a few years ago. I had a food intolerance test done on me. They tested me on over 250 types of foods. And lo and behold, there are a lot of foods that I have an intolerance to. There's a handful that I have an outright allergy to, but uh, one of them, ironically, is potatoes, and I'm Irish descent. So I find that very ironic in a way, that someone that has Irish heritage is allergic to potatoes. But here we are. So, but I know what foods I have an intolerance to, so I do my best to avoid them. And what that means is the foods that are good for me, that my body naturally breaks down, it's not working overtime when it's trying to break those foods. It knows what it is. It knows how to process it and work it through the system. And when we sleep, that's when our digestive system is working. So if you're putting food in your body that is naturally good for you, whatever it happens to be, it's just going to flow. It's going to be easier. There's not going to be as much hesitation, which means your body's going to get more restful sleep. So sleep, food, exercise, and a key thing too, and I mentioned this before, do stuff in life you enjoy doing, even if you're working crazy hours. And it can be something simple like going and getting tea at your favorite shop across the corner, or you go to a bistro, or go for a walk, or there's a nature path by you, or you like crossword puzzles, or simple stuff, not where you have to drive a long way, or take a taxi a long way to get somewhere. Do things in life you enjoy doing, because that's all part of this harmonization of life, is to do things that are good for us, that we produce and create for other people. When you get more into harmony with all of those things, the better it is. So I know that was a lot of information at you, but I wanted to give you the what is burnout, what are some of the signs, how do you stop it kind of thing, because that's really important for people to do. And again, quoting Jim Rohn again, it's easy to do, but it's also easy not to do. And unfortunately, a lot of people are choosing the harder road instead of the easier road.
No, definitely. I mean, yeah, it was a lot of information, but it's useful information and it's important, as you say. So I'll try and remember all of it. But so a few bits that pop out. I mean, first of all, the idea of trying to medicate burnout, that makes me a little bit nervous, because that feels like I can see like a dystopian future where you're burnt out but you're not allowed to solve it. You just got to take a pill and keep working, and that's the way the boss wants it. And yeah, it's probably very similar to how a lot of people who suffer depression probably feel a lot of the time about medication that they're taking. But
absolutely, yeah, it scares me too. I don't want a medication for burnout, because it masks and it just puts a Band-Aid on a wound that isn't healed. You need to heal the wound, and that's again one of the hardest things for people to do, is to dig into, okay, why did I burn out? What choices did I make that created these scenarios? Because a phrase that I use from time to time, and it catches people off guard at first when I say it. I say burnout is a choice. And a lot of people get upset and they say, I didn't choose to be burned out. It's like, no one does, at least unless you have some type of mental challenge, then maybe you did. But most people do not choose knowingly to burn out. But the choices, their beliefs, the decisions they make, whether it's financial, where to work, where to live, who to marry, who to spend time with, those are all choices. And the circumstances from those choices can create stressful situations, and prolonged stress is what turns into burnout. So burnout is a choice, and you can choose differently. You just have to understand all the pieces that played into it. And a key tidbit of advice is, if you're doing that kind of work where you're digging back and trying to figure out why you burned out, approach it with a childlike curiosity. Don't approach it in a judgmental way. Like, I'm an idiot for making that choice. I'm an idiot for going out with that person. I'm an idiot for taking that job. I'm an idiot for signing that contract for that really expensive loft that I can't afford. Don't beat yourself up. Life does a good enough job of that for you. So approach the review of you like you were a 3-year-old kid, asking loved ones and adults question after question after question after question after question. We probably don't remember it, but our parents do. They remember us asking 8 billion questions in a 45-minute time span, because we're curious. We want to know. We don't know, and we want to know. So approach your review of your burned out state from a childlike curiosity, and it helps. It helped me, and it was a real big deal in helping me heal from my own burnout journey. And it's something that I always tell people to do because it makes it easier to go through those challenging times, to look and go, okay, what led this burnout to show up on my front porch?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the old the root cause analysis. I think, with any problem, if you don't know what's caused it, you're not really going to solve it, at least not deliberately. Maybe by accident if you're really lucky. But
but
yeah.
you're probably more likely to win a lottery than discover it by accident. Yeah, so it's important. It's important. It's important work to do.
Absolutely, yeah. And going back to what you were saying before, I think I didn't realize it at the time, but in hindsight, I think I've gone through burnout twice in my life. One of them was nothing to do with work, actually. It was like in a volunteer context. It was something I was doing for a hobby. And originally that was the fun thing I did to distract from work. And maybe that's why it caught me out so easily. But the second time, yeah, I didn't see it coming. I didn't necessarily realize that's what it was until afterwards. But as you were talking earlier and explaining, particularly in the things you can do, things you can think about, things you can do to recover from it, and just thinking. So, I mean, like the diet thing. So we were working hours that were too long. Because we were so under pressure, we weren't eating right because it's easier to just get Deliveroo or whatever. And so you're eating badly. You're not getting exercise because you're at your desk the whole time. Like you walk to the door to get the meal delivery, and that's it. Like the rest of the time, you're back in your chair. It was before standing desks were really a thing as well.
Yeah.
So there's that side of it, and then all of that obviously has an impact on your sleep. On top of which is you're stressed out about work all the time. You're constantly thinking about it. The emails are coming in at 2:00 in the morning or whatever, and you're expected to answer them immediately and all that sort of nonsense. So your sleep suffers for multiple reasons in all of that. And on top, I mean, I used to get I don't know if you ever had this, but like the Sunday afternoon headache because you knew that Monday morning was just around the corner and you're already you're pre-stressing about it. All of that sort of stuff. And then the thing that I noticed the most, the thing that was kind of the red flag for me that made me reassess what I was doing, it was as you kind of described, it was the short fuse. I mean, I've always been an impatient person by nature, and my parents will tell stories about that, I'm sure, but for me, it was in that workplace setting that impatience became anger, and to a point that it caught me by surprise, and even a friend had said, "Look, are you okay? Because that is not your usual reaction to this sort of thing." And that was kind of the wake up moment, and then there was a whole load of other things that happened in that setting, which were not really to do with me, but they were office politics. Let's use the catch-all phrase there. And I think, I was fortunate in a way, and also probably not that clever about it, because I got to a point as right, that's enough. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to go and find something else to do. So I just removed myself from the situation, which in practice meant quitting my job without another job to go to. Hence, they're not very clever. But it was the right thing to do, I think, for my mental health and for everything I've been able to do since, career-wise and work-wise, and the podcast, all of these things, none of it would have happened otherwise. And very quickly, I mean, within days, I was sleeping much better. I was getting 8 hours a night, dead easy. I was eating better, obviously, because I was at home. I was exercising more because I had free time.
Mm-hmm.
And I lost I think a stone or two within
Beautiful
3 months, and I hadn't even really. My weight has always been fairly consistent most of my life, or my adult life, and I didn't realise that I put it on even until afterwards. And again, it's so many of these things that I didn't really realise were affecting me until much later when I looked back and that wasn't really that healthy, was it? I probably shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, you think about one negative quote unquote thing, if it only impacts you, let's say maybe 1%. Okay, well, if you have 100 of those 1%, then you got 100%, and you gain the weight. You're not sleeping. You're not doing things. You're short-tempered. When you're out with friends, normally that's jovial time. You're having maybe a couple pints. You're watching some football or the Olympics or whatever happens to be on the television, and you're enjoying your life. but then you're ticked off, or you start arguing at the screen that the ref blew a call, and they're kind of looking at you going, "Yeah, we knew you blew a call, but the ref can't hear you right now, and two, why is that such a big deal for you?" And when it's not your normal self, and and these are all signs that many of us, when we're going through it, don't recognize it, but our loved ones and our friends do. The people that know us well enough will recognize, ooh, you are not having a good time. And when I had my burnout, I talked to friends and loved ones about it afterwards. I said, why? Did you know I was burned out? And they said, oh, yeah, we knew. And I said, well, why didn't you say something? We did. You wouldn't listen to us. And sometimes we put on those blinders and earplugs, and we don't hear it. We're like, no, that's not it. That's not it. They're not. If someone tells you we think you're burned out, they're not doing it to degrade you. They're doing it because they're concerned about you. So if someone says we think you're burned out, ask some probing questions and say, okay, why do you think that? What are some signs that you're seeing? Just get a little more into it, because sometimes you get somebody outside of our fishbowl and they say some things and you go, ooh, hey, all right, well, now you can start making some adjustments to change the temperature a bit. And, and when you do these adjustments or changes, however you want to describe them, you want them to be for the long term. Because for me, the burnout that I had, nearly killed me. So needless to say, I don't want to go down that road ever again. So I made the choice of, okay, what do I need to do to make sure that never happens? And it helps, working in this field. So you're constantly inundated with information and new things about burnout and, the different challenges and techniques that people are using. But it boils down to making choices to take care of yourself first and really doing the best you can for you. Because when you do that, then when you do give or help other people, they're getting a much better version of you. And that's ultimately what we want. We want to give our best, but in order to do that, we have to be our best. And what does that look like? For everybody, it's different, but figure out what that is for you and make the necessary moves in your life. Might be quick, might take a long time, but it's worth it because it's investing in you. I think that's what the takeaway from all this is. Just make sure you're taking care of the best version of you, because then the world benefits from that.
100%. And it's that piece, isn't it, about like knowing yourself, what works for you, what doesn't, and what are the triggers for stress, which could then build up and become burnout later, and being able to recognize those and avoid them. And so like something that I've found works really well for me since, because being a solo business owner, it's quite easy, I think, to put too much on your plate for yourself, because you want to succeed, don't you? And there's no one else to do it or help you. So you got to, what I've found really helpful is like understanding my kind of working cycles throughout the day, even. So like, which hours am I really good at that focused, productive work? And it's trial and error to figure this out if you don't already know. And then when's the best time to do something like this with a conversation where it's my brain's engaging, but I'm not having to like put serious deep thought into writing an essay or something, for example. And I found, quite to my surprise, actually, the best time for like really detailed work and like typing away sort of stuff for me is like between 7 and 10 in the morning, which is weird because I've always thought of myself as more of an evening person. But, trial and error, and I definitely produce my best work at that time of day. And then this sort of time now, so it's it's about 3 p.m. in the UK, is the best for this kind of thing, where I'm at the standing desk, so I don't have to worry about nodding off after lunch, or if I do, it'll make for quite funny content. So, that I think is a practice that everyone should do anyway, burnout or not.
Yeah, understanding when your energy is good for what is a game changer. It's something that I learned about 7 years ago for myself, and it was the kind of work that I was doing at the time. The business was in its early days, and like you mentioned, you're doing everything. You're the accountant, you're the marketing team, you're the content creation, you're the janitor, you're all of those things as a solopreneur when you first start off. And the key of it is to figure out, okay, what are the 2 or 3 most important things that I can do today to move things forward? All the other stuff, it's on another to-do list. It's there. I know it's there. Don't worry about it. It's like, oh yeah, I probably should dust the dining room. It's a little dusty in there because I haven't eaten there because I just eat at the couch or wherever. And it's like, I should probably clean that up. Yeah, that's probably should, but is that the most important thing you do right now? No. In most cases, not unless you have a dust allergy, then maybe you should. But ultimately, you want to figure out what are those 2 or 3 things that I can do today to move things forward, but also match like you have your energy levels. There's certain parts of the day where you're more energetic to do certain types of things or use certain parts of your brain. And understanding and discovering what those are helps you maximize your productivity. Where you said 7 a.m. is when you're doing great work. So you realize, okay, I'm going to put the work that matches up with that then, and you're going to accomplish a whole lot more in an hour or two than if you said, I'm going to do that at 7 o'clock at night. 7 o'clock at night, you're like, brain's going, nice try. No, we're not going to do it. And your brain just starts going off in imaginary land. And you start thinking about everything under the sun to, I wonder what, color socks Winston Churchill liked to wear, just weird, anomalies that aren't doing anything for your business unless you're a sock company. But so that's what happens is you start losing attention and fading off and looking off at different things. And when you're in that deep focus mode that's lined up with the work that you're doing, you get a lot more done in less time. And, it's one of the big game changers for me is just understanding your energy and really, tapping into that and maximizing it, knowing that there are days that you're going to get a lot done. And there's going to be days where it doesn't feel like you got anything done, but you did. You still had some momentum moving forward. And it's just little step here and there. That's why, when people ask me what's my favorite leadership book, I tell them it's The Tortoise and the Hare, because, the tortoise wins the race, slow, steady, moves along, goes at, pace, some days a little slower, some days a little faster, where the rabbit's bouncing all over the place, scatterbrained and trying everything under the sun, whether it's funnels or PDFs or this or that. If you're an entrepreneur, oh, got to do a course, got all these things. And it's like, it's taking away from, what's your mission? What are you trying to do? Well, be simple, start off that way, and then you can scale up if those things make sense. But it's a difficult battle. It's a daily battle for entrepreneurs and business leaders every day. And it's just, every day you kind of check in with yourself going, okay, what's going to move things forward today? What are the couple of things I can work on today to get things moving forward? And you do them. And you'll feel that level of accomplishment, and it keeps you engaged and renewed. Because otherwise, like you found out with your hobby, it started off as a great thing and ended up being, this is burning me out. This isn't a good thing anymore. And, that happens more often than not.
Indeed. Yeah, sadly so. I've found as well, I'm a lot better at kind of like not letting myself off the hook, but forgiving myself. If I feel like I've not had as productive day as I could have, like a few years back, I would have been really sort of kicking myself for that, saying, well, why didn't you get this done? Why didn't you get that done? And now it's exactly as you say. I look at it more as the tortoise rather than the hare, and it's okay as long as we get to the goal. I'm not in a rush. I'm enjoying the process.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And I've also found I've got way better at prioritization as well. So yeah, I mean, totally agree with that point too.
That's good. Yeah. That is a skill set. It is an art and a science, quite frankly. But once you figure that out and understand that there's going to be days that are going to be better than others, but you keep focused in on those tough days that are grinding. You just go, all right, I'm not going to get this done, and that's okay. But you go, all right, what can I do? And sometimes that's when you, just to keep momentum going, you'll look at that other list of things to do. Let's say like dusting the dining room, for example. You're like, all right, I'm going to spend 5 minutes and dust it. And it takes you 2 because your dining room's not that big. And I don't know that, but most people, we live in smaller places now than our ancestors did. So it's probably not that big. So it won't take you long. You get it done. You're like, okay, you feel that accomplishment. And it's important for you to recognize that, okay, I feel good by that. Okay, why? Well, you got the dopamine hit. Great. Okay, but what else? Why does that make you feel better? And sometimes it's in many ways, it's like, slamming down an energy drink. It's like, wow, and I feel I can take on the world. I just dusted my dining room. But it's simple things like that that, convince ourselves that, yes, we can accomplish what we want to accomplish. And it gives us that additional internal pep talk to say, yeah, you can get through this. And I think that's important for us to do that every day because, like I said, life will beat you up no matter what happens. So don't be the one beating yourself up. Just navigate through life and do the best you can, and you'll be surprised how well things turn out.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. It's a good message. I like it. So one other thing I wanted to talk about, particularly with the burnout side of it, we see a lot of headlines about burnout on the rise, particularly in the healthcare industry. Actually, funnily enough, and in the UK with the NHS, the National Health Service as well. I mean, that's always in the headlines for staff consistently burning out and things like that. I mean, first of all, do you think that's a fair assessment, or is the media just getting a bit excited about it?
It's definitely a fair assessment, having worked in the
Okay.
sector, and I'm familiar with the challenges that NHS has, both from a staffing standpoint or regulations and compliance. And you were seeing that a bit in the U.S., but not to the same scale where clinicians and physicians, because of regulatory guidelines and documentation requirements and compliance and all of that stuff, a lot of clinicians are spending a lot more time on administrative related tasks instead of clinical tasks, which is not why they went into medicine. A doctor didn't go into healthcare to say, yeah, I'm looking forward to those 50 hours a week of charting. That's if they were so heavy on that kind of thing, they should have just chose to be a copywriter or editor. Would have been a better fit for them. They don't want to do that. They want to practice medicine. They want to help people get healthier. They want to take care of them. The administrative side of things has been nightmarish, and it continues to be. And I know we kind of talked about AI a little bit in the pre-show. My hope is that one way to leverage AI is that we can automate or have a sidekick side by side to be able to do the charting and the documentation that's accurate, to protect everybody involved. So that way the clinicians can do what they're trained to do, is be clinicians, and getting the right staffing and the hours that nurses and healthcare workers and physicians work is just appalling. You're burning, is if it's a government funded thing or even insurance funded thing, they're human beings that need time away. They're not machines. They need time to rest and recover. And in particular, healthcare, it's one of those handful of industries that what you do as a clinician could have life or death impact on the people you serve. Now, if you're an accountant, not likely. If you're a lawyer, depending, depending if you're a criminal case and where that location is a death penalty type of situation, then okay, yeah, it might be a life or death. But most industries, not life or death. Healthcare is. So you had that added pressure to things. So it's really difficult to see, but I think, and where I'm hopeful, is that we'll be able to leverage technology so we can take away the administrative side of things as much as we can to allow our clinicians just to do the clinical work, or have a sidekick with them to do all the charting that's, fully vetted and documented and all that kind of good stuff. So it protects everybody and documents what needs to be documented for the proper care of that patient and all of that. But ultimately it's figuring out, okay, what's the right number of hours for clinicians to work? What can we do to make sure that they're taking care of themselves so they can be clear-minded and fully there and physically and mentally healthy? So that way, when they are working with patients, they can diagnose and properly address what needs to be addressed for the patient. And it's critically important to do this because population is getting much older. We know the baby boomer generation, they're they're well into the retirement age, and they're the ones, huge population still, and they're the ones that demand a ton of the healthcare system, and we're having less and less people go into the healthcare system. So the writing's on the wall that we have some huge challenges ahead for the sector, which causes prolonged stress, and we all know what happens with prolonged stress. So it's definitely a concern of mine, and I'm hoping that everyone can collectively come together and talk about ideas to alleviate it, to protect our very valuable people that work in the sector.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. And I mean, the AI and the new technologies, I agree. Like, it's always felt like the purpose of that needs to be take away the monotonous tasks, the admin, the low brain. That's not the right phrase, is it? But the low brain power kind of tasks, maybe that sort of repetitive stuff. And then free up, and whether it's in healthcare with freeing up people to do the actual people stuff, the healthcare, the reason they're there in the first place, or like in the creative industries, free up the creative minds to do the artwork and all of that sort of thing. And I mention creative for a reason, because it feels like the current generations of AI, they're going the wrong way with that balance.
Yeah, the admin stuff, yeah, by all means, like, summarize this sheet, or, here, give me, I do this all the time, whether it's a long email message, or maybe it's a free PDF download that I would have grabbed on something. It could have been on marketing or whatever subject. I can have AI say, okay, can you summarize this into the top 10 action items for me to focus on? And nothing against the writers or the creators, because the content is good, but in this time where I want to maximize my time where I'm being productive, and if I can get the executive summary basically of it, then I can go and say, okay, that is really rich. There's a lot there. Okay, maybe I should allocate the time and read the entire document from front to back, because there's some really good stuff in there. And then other stuff, a lot of times, there's just fluff and filler to fill up the content, but there's still good stuff in there. So again, it's with charting, or you're having the conversation, they can record the conversation with the patient and summarize all the key points, and maybe not talk as much about Uncle Floyd and his propensity to stay up too late and keep everybody awake, although that's an important fact. If you're not getting sleep, you want that documented, but it doesn't need to be a 10-minute conversation about it. It's like, just, they have a family member, keeps them up at night, impacting their sleep. There, summarized. If you want the detail, click on the MP3 file and get the full detail, because it's there. But there's, again, a lot of ways to leverage it, but leverage it in a way where it's maximizing the human element of things that humans can do, and not try to replace what humans can do just to get something done quick.
Yeah, plus famous doctor's handwriting solves that challenge as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, working in healthcare, I worked in healthcare for 15 years, and my penmanship went to absolute garbage. And if my dad was still alive, he would yell at me. He's like, "What is that? Your signature is complete garbage." I'm like, "I know. It just happened. I'm not happy about it either, but it is what it is."
I always just assume it's something they teach at medical school, and it's just part of being a doctor. But
I don't get me started on being sarcastic about what they teach and don't teach in medical school. That's another hour conversation for sure. But
fair enough. So moving on, you've given us some great things to look out for in terms of spotting burnout and being able to identify people, or yourself, if you might be lining up for it, shall we say. So if you're a leader and you've noticed some of those signs in someone in your team, what can a leader do? What should a leader do to help them address that, or to try and support them through it?
Real simply, walk the walk. People emulate their leaders. So if your people are burned out, there's a good chance you are creating an environment where that's happening. So change it. And it's simple as talking with your people and being vulnerable enough to let them be comfortable to share their insights and their perspectives. Because when you do that and those communication lines are open, you can get to the root cause of what's causing it and address it, and prevent your team from burning out. Because if you have a burned out team, then they're going to leave, and then you're constantly hiring people, and the autonomy and the workflows get impacted, deliverables get impacted. It just has this huge negative component if people are leaving for bad reasons. So it's imperative to walk the walk as a leader and make sure that you're living your best life, because then your team's going to emulate your activity and you're going to have a healthier organization.
It always comes back to me, it's leading by example, isn't it? It's
Very much so.
And I had this conversation with someone last week as well about it was more specifically about stress, but it's if anyone's ever had a conversation with their manager about stress, unless they're a particularly enlightened, forward-thinking manager, the response will likely have been something along the lines of, "What do you want me to do about it?" Or "I'm stressed too." And it is exactly what you just said. It's lead by example. If you're stressed too, if everyone in your team is stressed, you're the one who can do something about that. So do it. The chances are as well that by being that stressed yourself, you're setting the example that it's okay to feel that way, and that becomes part of the culture then. So yeah, love that advice.
Thank you.
What has been your own best experience of being led?
A boss that I had, and this is almost 25 years ago. I worked for an internet market research firm. It was a startup at the time. I think I was employee number 32. And now they've got thousands. They're global, publicly traded. And I remember my first day, I was sitting in my cubicle, and it was 3:32 p.m. That specific time, because he came over to my cubicle and he goes, "All right, just want to lay down the ground rules of how things are going to work here." And I'm thinking, okay, here we go. Micromanager time. Let's have it. Let's see what he's going to say. And he leans in and he goes, "I don't care when you get here. I don't care when you go home. As long as you get your work done, we're good. I'm here on Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays. I'm on the East Coast location Tuesdays and Wednesdays. You have my cell number. You can call me, text me anytime if you need something. Let me know if there's anything you need. Have a great time working here." And I sat back and I didn't cry. I probably should have, because it was just a shocking experience. And I was, a lot younger, obviously, a quarter century ago. But for me, it was one of those pinnacle moments. And I stayed in that organization for several years. It was during the dot-com era. So people were leaving, going to different companies because they were getting huge pay raises. I turned down offers. I'm like, no, I'm not leaving here, because I have this autonomy. And he allowed me to get trained how to do all kinds of different things. I went in there as like, I'm just, IT support kind of thing, to the point where I learned how to install phone systems. Now, I would never want to do that today, but from punching down the phone wires and testing and, adding new lines, moving lines in an office, all those things you have to call somebody to do. I knew how to do all of that. And my spouse at the time wouldn't let me reconfigure the phone system at home, because I'm like, "Hey, let's fix this so we can do this and do that." No, so she wouldn't let me do it. But at the end of the day, it was just a great opportunity with a startup that was growing, and just had a blast. I had a $6 million IT budget that I could play with, and I was literally in charge of ordering servers and setting up data centers and all these fun, cool things that I enjoyed doing at that time. It would be like, having a root canal. Now, if somebody asked me to do it, I'm like, I don't want to do that. I did it, but I had fun at that time doing it. And it was because, he gave me an opportunity to really thrive and shine, and I did. And I've been forever grateful, and I've thanked him, on a few occasions over the years for being such a great leader. And he was maybe 5 years older than me at the time. Still is only 5 years older than me now, but he was not like this old veteran person by any stretch. But he had the right mentors and leaders that gave him that opportunity, so he just carried it forward. And I'm proud to say that I did the same thing. And it's the best way to lead. It's just empower your people to be their best, and they'll likely do so.
I think that's the thing about leadership, isn't it? It becomes self-perpetuating in an organization, and we see it from the bad leaders. One of the most common answers, I think, or perhaps easiest answers to why there's so many bad leaders out there, is because there are so many bad leaders out there. And in organizations where they don't train you how to do it, and all you've got to go on is the example of the last manager you had, you just copy and paste, don't you, Kurt? Because you think that's the way it's done. Yep. But the same is true in this example for good leadership. Hooray!
Exactly.
Yeah, but I think, and it comes through, like, even 25 years ago, the way you were animated and talking about him, it was clear the impact he'd had on you. You remember the exact time and day of that conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, That says it all, doesn't it? It really does. Yeah.
It does, yeah. Important moment in my career that I cherish to this day.
So if you could go back in time, how far back would you go? And I'm going to limit that to within your own lifetime. And then what advice would you give to your younger self?
I'd go back to when I first started working and getting a paycheck, to invest more of it, buy Apple stock. That's probably what I would have done. Buy Apple stock and hold on to it for a while, because I'd be a multi-billionaire. But the funny thing is, that would have changed the trajectory of my life. And bumps and bruises, challenges and successes, I wouldn't go back and change anything. Even though I'd say do this and this, but I wouldn't change anything. And it's because, my life, could it be better? Of course. Could it be worse? Of course. But it's my life, and I've had a big part of it because I've been with myself the whole time. I wouldn't change a thing.
I think that's one of the two, actually, because you've given me two answers there, really. But the most honest answers I've had to that question. And it's a sign, though, isn't it, I think, of a life well lived, isn't it? If you look back and you say, do you know what? Yeah, things could have gone differently. That might have been better. That might have been worse. But I don't care. I'm happy with where I've ended up, and I wouldn't change that. Great. I'm pleased to hear it as well.
Thank you.
Leadership Heroes.
Okay, Michael, last question. This is always my favourite one, and it's why everyone gets it. Literally everyone. It never gets skipped. It's called Leadership Heroes. So if you had to pick one person, it could be anyone you like, literally, like alive or dead, past or present, or even real or fictitious, who in your opinion would perfectly embody leadership, who would that person be and why?
I always go and gravitate, and I've already mentioned him once in this call, is Winston Churchill. As an American, obviously there's, some history, and especially between his relationship with President Roosevelt and, their friendship and all of that. But I look at Churchill as this reluctant leader. He wanted to be prime minister, but he also had this element of didn't really want to be a part of it, and had to navigate, quite frankly, the world through probably some of the most treacherous moments of humanity. You can study history. There's plenty of historians in the UK. I think, I don't know how many million people live in the UK, but I think about 95% have some historian background in them, which is cool because there's just so much history to cover. But at the end of the day, I appreciate him for being able to navigate the situations, especially towards the end of World War II, to be able to do what he did to get against all odds, and people internally that didn't want him to succeed, and all the other things that history has laid out for us. Just his tenacity to do things, and I think ultimately to do things for the betterment of all. And I think that's one of the things that's always resonated with me about him.
Interesting. So he's been chosen a few times before. I find, I'm very intrigued that you describe him as a reluctant leader, because that is definitely not how his contemporaries saw him. He was quite often quite unkindly described as the kind of the power hungry.
Yeah, but I wonder, and maybe this is my therapy background and whatnot, is I don't want to say that was a mask, but I think there was some, like you mentioned earlier too, the imposter syndrome. I think he may have dealt with some of that, and that's what I'm kind of channeling a little bit with him. Is I think he wanted to do it, but he also didn't, and he's quite the conundrum. And obviously, historians can paint a picture on their research and expertise and all of that, but we may never fully know. But for me, I sense sometimes, and some of the things that I've read and seen, that's like I think he'd rather be doing something else at this particular point, but he knows he has to do this. And then other times, we all know about his directness. We'll call it that. If he was American, he'd be straight up from New York.
Well,
that's for
I
sure.
mean, he was half American, though, wasn't he? I'm sure his mother was American.
Yeah, I'm sure there was some.
Pretty
you know,
sure.
right, yeah, I don't remember exactly what part of the country
Yeah.
she's from, but probably from the original colonies. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely like a very strong sense of duty in him. I think that was clear from, I mean, anything you read about him. Yeah, I know what you mean. I think from what I've read about him, he definitely, like, he wanted some form of role or power, or however you want to describe it. I think a lot of that was about not trusting the alternatives to do a better job at the time, at various points in his career. But then he's also quite a contentious person in terms of post-war, and not so much the Cold War aspects of it, but the decolonization, particularly parts of Africa, definitely India. Him and Gandhi were quite famous adversaries, weren't they? And some of the things he did in his earlier career as well. Yeah, he's an interesting character from history, definitely. Awesome. Well, good pick. Sorry that it's been picked before, so you don't get your bonus points, but nevertheless, it was a good conversation as well. Michael, it's been great having you on the show. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time, because we have overrun. One last thing I'll say, if anyone wants to learn more about you, which I'm sure loads of them do, where can they go? What are the options?
The best place to go is breakfastleadership.com. There's all kinds of information on there, videos, links to my podcast, links to articles, links to my books, all kinds of information on there. So, and social media links are all up at the top, so you can pick your favorite social media platform and find me there.
Lovely. And I will find some of those links myself and pop them in the show notes as well. That's it. Thank you again so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Big thanks to Michael for his great input on burnout and more today. And hopefully, listener, you found our mini-series on burnout and stress useful. There's been loads of practical, relevant advice over these last 4 weeks, and I trust that you now have some great ideas and strategies that you can put into action to help you recognize, prevent, and recover from burnout or stress, whether it be yourself or your people. And a gentle reminder to please click on the links in the episode notes, learn more about Michael and what he does, catch an episode or two of his podcast too. And if you are a new leader, a first-time company founder or co-founder, or a manager in training, and you'd like to be more effective in your role, better respected by your people, and benefit from a supportive group atmosphere to learn about leadership, then come and join Integrity Leaders, community membership and learning for leaders just like you. You can participate in live workshops and events, benefit from extra and exclusive content, and get early access to Leading with Integrity podcast episodes just like this one. So head over to www.leadernotaboss.com to register today and get your first 2 months for free for a limited time only. Next month, that beta testing offer will be disappearing, so don't miss out. That's all for this episode. Hope you'll be here again next week when I'll be chatting confidence, limiting beliefs, and courageous leadership with my next guest, Sabine Gideon. Until then, be a leader, not a boss.